The Rival 300 is a great mouse with its unique shape and top optical sensor, but it was a bit heavy and kind of in between the hand sizes for recommendations. Later they released the Rival 700, which was smaller and better in a lot of ways, but it was far too heavy for most competitive gamers. I really liked the Rival 700, but wanted it to be lighter. Now we have the Rival 310, and despite the name, it's actually closer to the Rival 700 than the 300, and it only weighs about 92 grams, which is a good weight for me. It doesn't feel flimsy or too cheap. It seems mostly well made. That's also about 10 grams lighter than the Rival 300. It seems they've ironed out some design issues while creating others though. So regarding shape, the Rival 700 has a flat back. It's much better on the 310 as it fits the curve of your hand more. But the buttons are better on the 700. See how thin the gap is between the buttons compared to the 310? Other than that, they're essentially the same. This is one of my favorite shapes, and one of the only designs that keep my fingers straight on the mouse buttons. I don't know if that feature alone can help aim, but I've always felt comfortable aiming with the Rival shape. Now a tour of the mouse. It's an ergonomic design for right hand use. The top is textured plastic which can pick up on finger marks, and is slightly raised in the center, which helps prevent slipping, but still no comfort grooves in the buttons. I would really like to see them someday. There's a subtle curve for the thumb, and the slope goes outward at the top, which helps when picking it up. It also gives you something to grip without slipping and hitting the side buttons. This new rubberized pattern grip helps with that too. It's the same on the other side. The texture and subtle curves help with the grip. To really get an idea of the Rival shape, you need to look at the base. It's actually fairly thin at the front and wide at the back, which is why it's so hard to know what hand size this is made for. I'll get to that later. Those three mouse feet do glide nicely, with very little resistance or sound. The button slope is gradual, and the hump is toward the back, so it should suit all grip styles depending on hand size. Here it is next to the FK2, Sensei and G703, so you know the general size of it. For measurements, the grip width is about 5.8 centimeters. That measurement is going to affect your aim the most. The base length is about 12.6 centimeters, which is more relevant to how you hold the mouse. And the height is about 4.1 centimeters. You want to get a mouse that is roughly 60% of your hand measurements. This one I think would be ideal for 19 by 9.5 centimeters, and that's for all grip styles. It's still slightly too big for me, but I'd be happy using it with 18 by 9. The weight distribution feels centered, which puts it in line with the sensor. Moving on to the buttons, here is a listen to the clicks. Ignoring the marketing because this is about experience, the left button is slightly loose, giving it that little rattle before the click. Feel-wise, they're both quite good, with enough tension to avoid accidental clicks, but still light enough for gaming. Middle click is a bit tighter as usual, and the wheel feels cheap and weak. It's smooth enough for browsing, but it could definitely be made better. I prefer the wheel on the Rival 700. The side buttons are loud and again don't feel as good as the 700, but they're large and still out of the way, so they work well and they have low travel distance. The CPI button is out of the way, so all good there. In the latency testing, they appear the same as the G703, nothing in it, so that's really good. Overall, the buttons are quite good, but could be made better, as usual, and they should be suitable to all game types. In game, I could use multiple buttons together, and now moving on to the sensor, it's the new Optical called the TrueMove 3. I have heard what the sensor is, but I'm not that interested in the names. I'm more interested in the performance and implementation. So with rocket jumping, no problem, it handles it well. Moving it as fast as I can't make it spin out. And even when tilting it on its side and then slamming it down, still no spin outs. Zooming in for the sniper test, it tracks pixel by pixel, and it moves as smoothly as expected at 1600 and 400 CPI. There's no acceleration that I can find. The lift-off distance is about 1 DVD on hard and cloth pad. It doesn't seem like there's any delay, and testing the 360, it's about the same as the G703. In the line test, there's no unusual jitter, angle snapping, or skipping. Lift-off movement is really good, and there's no sensor rattle. For the build, everything seems quite good, even when shaking it. The cable also seems really good, about 2 meters long, flexible and smooth, even if a bit grippy, and it can barely push the mouse back. In the software you can alter the buttons to the usual keyboard commands, media, launch programs and more, and the macro editor picks up on mouse and keyboard, but not the mouse wheel. The lowest CPI is 100, and it goes up in steps of 100, and that's all the way to 12,000. You can set 2, and 1 profile can be stored on the mouse. Then there are the usual options of acceleration, angle snapping, and polling rate, and lastly it's an RGB mouse, and it has 2 lighting zones, which can be synced up. You can make your own gradients, which are nice and smooth, or you can set static, breathing, or just turn them off. Now some highlights while I give my conclusion. I really like this mouse. It's almost a small version of the Rival 300 I've been wanting. I felt very comfortable aiming, and despite it being a bit big for my hand, I think the shape can make up for it a bit. Although comfort wise, while the shape is very good, it's still not as comfortable as my usual top mice choices. So it's very good in a lot of ways, but it's not going to replace my main. That said, if for whatever reason you don't like the other mice, and this shape is more suited to you, then I can highly recommend it. While the Sensei is loved, I still think that this is the best mouse for right-handers. They pretty much have everything right on the mouse, with the shape, sensor, weight, buttons, and more. And with further improvements, maybe one day we'll see it climb even higher on the list. Definitely a top recommendation from me, as long as it suits your needs. So check it out and see if it's for you. I'm going to give it a top 10 award, which I'll start giving to all mice that make it into the top 10 at some stage. And it's great to see that SteelSeries is listening to competitive FPS and mobile players, and making mice with what we want in mind. They did send me this mouse for review, but to those new to the channel that might want some evidence for me not being biased, then you might want to watch the Rival 700 review, because I didn't hold back talking about the problems in that. It's just to fix most of the problems, so you should be able to understand why I'm so happy with the Rival 310. Anyway, great mouse, definitely check it out. If you want to help support the channel, I'll leave the usual links in the description. Subscribe for more reviews and gaming videos, like and share this one, and I'll catch you in the next.